Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. Approximately 6 to 10 of the general population and 15 to 50% of persons who are genetically prone to develop allergies are allergic to mold. So over 21 million people with asthma are suspected of having symptoms exacerbated by mold allergies. So it's really important to assess your house regularly to see any signs of potential water damage and mold growth. While basements are usual suspects for harboring mold, there are over 1,000 types of mold, and we are exposed to them in various ways every day. That's why we're so glad to chat on IG Live today with Integrative Health Practitioner Taylor Sappington. Taylor is an integrative health practitioner who has really useful tips on her feeds about mold. So we invited her. And during this live, we are going to discuss symptoms of mold exposure that are common and uncommon, as well as foods that high in mold, myth about mold, and so much more. So I saw Oh, here you are.
And we are live.
Yes, we're live. Pretty soon.
Yeah.
Hello, Taylor.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for taking the time to join us. We've
Yes.
talked about mold in the past, but the lesser kind we have not talked about, and also mold myth debunk. We have not debunked a lot of myths, so I'm so glad that you agreed to go on live and then talk to us about these issues.
Let's do it. There's so many misconceptions about mold that are lingering and lurking out there. So clarity is always good when it comes to this conversation.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you became an integrative health
I
practitioner.
actually have a pretty long and varied past in the clinical field. So I started off as a dietitian and realized relatively quickly that that was not the path for me. All the training later, you're like, oh goodness, I don't think I actually want to do this the way I wanted to help people. Just that was not found in that field. So I pulled out of that, but I remained in what's called a transitional care coordinating position. So I still had patient contact. I was still able to interact with healthcare providers. I was still able to keep a pulse on insurance and what was going on in hospital systems while I put myself through additional schooling to get to where I am today. But I think more importantly, I was also a chronically ill patient, and everything that I needed was unfortunately not being found by the Western medical model that I was very, very deep in terms of getting care. So I got a lot of care that just kept me running in circles, if you will. So when I finally met the naturopaths in my life and the acupuncturists and the herbalists, I was like, oh God, these people are really onto something. There's this whole world out here that I didn't even realize existed. And that's what really pulled me into what I'm doing today, which is multimodality. I go by integrative health practitioner, but I'm utilizing the best of all of it, if you will.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's your own, also your not just career journey, but you also your own health journey, kind of like help prepare you to become this integrative health practitioner. I love
I think that's a lot of us. We get, lost in the thick of things and we're like, oh, we need help. And the help that we need is not necessarily readily available. So it expands the reach of what's available to people when we move into that place. And it amplifies the voice of the collective for everybody that's here to serve in that capacity.
I mean, this was also reflected in your Instagram handle, and I love it. It's tailored to well-being, but with your name Taylor,
Yes.
this is super clever. I love it.
Yeah.
What does tailored health resonate with you?
We are so individual. It's interesting because I'm sure many of us have been to the doctor where we're given a blanket diagnosis and then a blanket set of things that we need to do or a blanket prescription. I mean, if you think about dosing, there are like 3 doses, but none of the doses take into consideration like age, sex, body weight, all of the variances that exist amongst us that could really influence and impact the way something integrates into our system. So Taylor Well-Being came from the notion that literally everybody that walks into our door is going to have an individualized. There are similar tools that we use but the way with which they're going to be applied, the length that they're going to be applied, the reason they're going to be applied is quite literally individualized and unique to their presentation, their need, etc. So I just got lucky with the name. I'm like, this just fits.
No, it's absolutely perfect. So as you just mentioned, like, a reason for having sort of tailored wellness
Mhm.
experiences that, we're all living like very unique environment with different exposures
Yeah.
and like when it comes to mold, especially. So for those who might not be
Mhm.
aware, what are some common symptoms of mold exposure?
So a lot of the mold symptoms are very vague and generalized, which is why we end up getting diagnosed with things based on a sum of symptoms as opposed to all the symptoms that we're presenting with. You go to the doctor and you have like fatigue and inflammation and brain fog, and they're like, oh, it sounds like you have Epstein-Barr virus or chronic fatigue. We're just going to put you in this bucket because it's easiest for us to understand, right? When it comes to mold exposure, most people present with anxiety, believe it or not. So one of the primary symptoms that presents is anxiousness, like this predisposition to constantly present as anxious. Cognitive abilities really start to go too. A lot of people have a hard time remembering where they were going in the middle of a sentence. They can't find the words they want to use. They have really poor short-term recall. Many women, men as well, but it looks different in men. It's a little more obvious in women. Women have a lot of irregularity in their menstrual cycle. So they're long or they're short or they're really heavy and super painful. We can see rashing that makes no sense, like eczema and hives and psoriasis, and we're just writing it off. And it's like, no, there's a reason all of these things are there. And if we're not getting to the root with the first three things we try, go a little bit deeper. Fatigue is really common. It's just this low level, I feel terrible all the time. It's not this super pronounced, I'm sick. It's just, overall low level, I feel terrible. But anxiety is the number one symptom that most people present with. And who today does not have anxiety to some degree? So it can make it a little tricky, but there are other things that go along with it too, like skin presentations, as mentioned, acne and rashes, cognitive impairment, hormonal dysfunction, dysregulation, gastrointestinal upset. So many people talk about the gut these days. And do I agree? Do I agree that there's an importance? Yeah, absolutely. But are we actually paying attention to what's causing it to be dysregulated? Yeah.
Yeah, because it might not just be your pro and prebiotics that you just need to take. It's like it could be so many other things. And if you actually don't get to this root cause, say if it's like, caused by mold, by add
Yeah.
pre or pro is actually could be actually harmful for you.
Absolutely. And it could be creating adding fuel to the fire, right? Most people don't know. This is like getting in the weeds. You and I live in this world, right? So it's easy for us to know this stuff, but most of these microorganisms operate based off of networks of biofilms. So if we're like throwing things into the mix that are just expanding the biofilm, we're not doing anything to actually help the overarching ecosystem or obviously prevent further colonization and spreading of what it is we're dealing with.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I think before people start taking pre or probiotics
Mhm.
supplements or anything, not only getting a test is important, but also actually see someone and figure out what exactly can help them before,
Yeah.
blindly taking supplements and then make your condition
I
worse.
often wonder how many people end up in practice that have made it unknowingly made themselves worse because they've taken, information off the internet and applied it. Or they saw someone who didn't quite understand what they were dealing with and started a protocol that wasn't a good fit, but kept going because, if it doesn't hurt, it's not working. Like we very much live in a world where it's like no pain, no gain. And I'm like, actually, but maybe that's not what we're looking for, right? Maybe in some instances the discomfort is totally appropriate, but this whole like let's push through doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, today we're focusing on the lesser known source of mold, but
Yeah.
first, like, what are some common places that people should start to look
I
first?
think what we know, in abundance, what we're researching most is food. So, like, we're very familiar with agricultural exposures. Some of the most common food sources of mold, peanuts. Oh, God, peanuts and peanut butter, guys. Very sorry. Valencia peanuts are going to be your best bet. They're considered low mycotox, okay? Your coffee, sorry to break it to you, coffee drinkers, a little bit of mold every day is going to be highly problematic. So Purity Coffee, Kion, Clean Coffee, those are brands that actually do testing for mold, mycotoxins, pesticides. Cacao, how many of us love cacao and like baking? That's another food. Chocolate, popcorn, corn in general. So we're very familiar with the food-based sources. What we're not as familiar with, but it's a big sector of research right now, is environmental exposure. We're taught that mold is just a naturally occurring element. And yeah, that's true, but it's best served in your garden or in a forest or, like where the fungi can feed other things that thrive off of it being fed by fungi. When it comes to, house-based exposures, a lot of the times bathrooms, most of us don't look underneath our sink too. Like y'all clean out underneath your sink, keep it as bare or as organized as possible. So under the sink, air conditioning for those of us that live in highly humid and tropical conditions, Florida, we're getting to the point in the year where the dial turns up outside. Your air conditioning, your air condenser, the coils within your air conditioning unit, your vents, those can be a really common place where mold grows and provides exposure. It's interesting because you think about bathrooms, ventilation is so key in your home. Like you want to keep the air moving, and so many of us don't realize that. Turn your exhaust fan on, man. Like 30 minutes before you get in the shower, leave it on 30 minutes after. So like bathrooms that are poorly ventilated and have high humidity, obviously, as mentioned, underneath sinks, air condensers, finished basements. How many of us grew up with a finished basement? Not knowing that obviously it expands and it contracts and there's a lot of moisture. And when we start adding paper or drywall right to the structure below, we're oftentimes creating a big issue. So finished basements, attics, those are the primary places in the environment. Hotels, we're getting into vacation season, and Airbnbs. Look up and look down, use your flashlight. These places are known to be rampant with mold, and that could be an exposure. You go on vacation, you feel great because you're stress free, and that's only going to help, right? But then you come home congested and feeling a little icky, and there's a good chance you had an exposure. Cars, true. I don't want to forget that one. Cars.
Cars.
Cars. You have an HVAC system in your car.
Right.
Yep. And then we have all these places where moisture could potentially get in, especially if we have sunroofs. So pay attention to like the air filtration system in your car as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, talking about source of mold, like you mentioned about food. I mean, I'm a big fan of peanut butter.
Me-
I have a jar of peanut
Me
butter
too.
on my.
Me
I literally have a jar of peanut butter on my
Yes.
desk. Yeah, this is like stressed out.
Uh-huh.
Here, let's move on.
Yes. I love peanut
Oh, yeah, same. So in like a mold can contaminate food. So like, why is mold can contaminate food? And then like what are some like of the moldest food? Like peanut butter, I know is one.
Yeah, so obviously it's going to be our farming and storing practices. So think about it. Like soybeans is another good example. Edamame, where do we harvest them from? Obviously they're outside, they're exposed to the elements. And then obviously the bean sits inside of a stalk. Well, it's dark and it's moist, right? Or grains. Another good one is grains. We take the grains from the harvest and we put them in a silo. Well, silos are not climate controlled, and it's not like most of these companies are doing rigorous testing before these grains are utilized. Unfortunately, big agriculture is all about big bucks, and they don't have time to slow down and do third-party testing and make sure that everything that we're consuming has been, as mentioned, rigorously tested. So I mentioned a few of the foods earlier, but there's grains we can add to that list. So rye, wheat, barley, etc. Edamame or soybeans is another thing we can add to that list. Legumes and peanuts, they all go in the same family. We can add to that list of coffee and cacao and peanut butter. So it's really knowing your brand's integrity, if you will, and knowing the types of, like, Valencia peanut is a particular type of peanut that can be utilized, right? That's low mold, low mycotox. So those are the primary, and corn. We have a huge gluten-free movement in the United States, okay? What is the primary grain we utilize to substitute for everything that has gluten in it?
Corn.
Right. Or cassava. That's another one we get to think
Yeah.
of. Yeah, so corn and cassava could be potential, corn more so than cassava, right? But those two can be potential exposures as well too. Mm-hmm.
Wow, interesting. So what are some negative like effects of if you are consuming moldy food regularly?
Oh goodness, your poor digestive tract, right? So different molds have different mycotoxins. So one of the most common molds that presents to be problematic in food is fusarium. And fusarium is commonly associated with a corn-based consumption, okay?
Mm.
So when we have the consumption of fusarium and then there are mycotoxins, so mold is the tangible piece. Like I could see your glasses, I could take them off your face, you can touch them, right? That's mold in this entire conversation. Mycotoxins are it's the air around us. We can't see it. We know it's there. We're breathing and talking, right? But we're not as aware of it. So when it comes to mold, that's the tangible piece, but the mycotoxins are what present the biggest problem, and they're lipophilic. So they love to go to fatty membranes in the body. Think about the most important aspects of our function: our brain, all fat; our sex hormones, all fat, right? Our cell membranes, all fat. So when we consume these foods that are high mold, high mycotoxin, it's the mycotoxin that's going to start to, impact far and wide. So let's just roll with fusarium and corn consumption. Fusarium, one of the mycotoxins is zearalenone, right? Or ZEA. That has a heavy impact on reproductive organs and fertility and the ability to carry out a viable pregnancy or see regularity in the menstrual cycle. That's just one aspect that can be impacted when we're consuming moldy foods. Citrinin is another example, right? Citrinin is known as the multi-mold species. I always call it like the misfits. I'm like, everybody that didn't fit into a group went to citrinin. And citrinin is known to cause issues in areas of high cell turnover, but your gastrointestinal tract is like its primary focus. So we see a lot of like, I did just fine with the avocado I ate last week, and now I'm having a response to it. Idiopathic food sensitivities. Because mold has a tendency, once it's taken over and it's manipulated your immune system, because it's capable of doing that at a genetic level nonetheless, it starts to flag food as a foreign invader. Well, our body does that anyway and then retreats its response. It's like, oh, I know what this is. We need it. It's good to go. It can come through the gate. Once mold enters the conversation and the equation, we don't get that retreat and response. It's like a full-blown immune attack on what's coming into the ecosystem. And this is where we start to see deficiency, malabsorption, multi-organ system dysfunctionality, digestive dysfunction. So we call it consturia in practice. Most people who have mold and mycotoxin, they're either not pooping or they can't stop pooping and they vacillate, right? So inability to interact with certain foods, but you can't figure out why. Even when you're food journaling and tracking symptoms, the symptoms will present and then they'll go away. And then obviously bowel-based issues, which have far and wide reaching impacts on all organ systems.
I felt like everything you described, I felt like there are people like that, and then but then being diagnosed with like IBS or some other thing,
Totally.
and then being given like steroid, but
Totally.
the traditional doctors are totally almost barking on the wrong tree because
Yep.
steroid and other things will make the symptom worse if you don't eliminate your mold exposure, which is it's actually like if you find out about it, it's a much easier fix in a way than
Yeah.
taking steroid and doing other things that's potentially really harmful for your body.
Yeah, totally. I mean, think about it. Steroids, let's just talk about steroids for a hot second. Steroids increase biofilm production, So like that, hello, big problem right there. Biofilms are like the jacket for these things. It's like it's hide and seek, but the body is never able to actually seek. It's constantly, like these things are constantly hiding and the body's like, I know you're here. I can feel you staring at me, but I don't know where to look for you.
Yeah.
And then you take a medication like steroids where you may get a temporary, relief, but long term, it's going to make the issue much, much worse. Yeah. Same thing with antibiotics. Some of them are derived from mold.
Okay, let's talk about that. You
Yeah.
guys tell us about moldy medications and how they can impact someone who is already sensitive to mold.
Well, think about it, right? If you have a mold allergy or a mycotoxin load and you're taking penicillin or amoxicillin, it's like adding fuel to the fire. People that end up rashing, I'm like, you're the lucky ones because we know you have an issue with penicillin and we know you have an issue with amoxicillin. Think about the kids that can't do it, right? Curious, right? Interesting. But for those of us that don't know we're dealing with mold and we're taking these things, again, we may experience temporary relief based on the overpowering of the dose and the frequency of the dose. But long term, not only are we completely and catastrophically getting rid of the microbiome that's there to really help offset some of this overgrowth, but we're producing further biofilms and we're only amplifying the allergenic response and or the load on the body, if you will. I told most people, like, if there's a need for antibiotic, validate that there's a need first.
Yeah.
And if there's a need, ask if you can use another class of antibiotic, right? Just ask if there's an alternatives for what you're being recommended. Really important.
Absolutely. Considering antibiotic resistance is also on the rise, you
Yes.
kind of don't want to run out of options
Right.
and make things worse.
Well, think about sinus infections. This is another symptom that we see a lot of, like chronic sinusitis, chronic congestion, chronic phlegm, ear popping, postnasal drip. If that's something that's recurrent in your presentation, you probably don't have perpetual sinus infections. There's probably something else going on that's colonized in your sinubiome and then throughout the sinus cavities in the face. And when we utilize antibiotics, again, we're only amplifying the long-term response because we're not actually dealing with, in most cases, a bacterial issue. So it's a completely inappropriate use. And to your point, now we're seeing superbugs. Cheers. Yeah, talk about making it harder for us.
It's so crazy. You had a great reel debunking the mold myth.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like some of these are like the mold myth. So one of the myth is that if mold doesn't smell, it's fine. Is that true?
So think about it. If you live in a home, I love this. People come into practice and they're like, I have a new home. And I'm like, that does not mean you're safe. In most instances, new homes are built fast, they're built cheap, right? And they're built in the easiest way we can possibly put a home up. So if you move into this house, but the drywall that you have on each one of your walls has been exposed to external elements, or the frame of the house, which is wood. How many of us encapsulate a house when we build it so that it's not exposed to rain, snow, hail, humidity, right? And a lot of the times these builders just scrub it off and then slap things over it. So if you move into a home and the drywall has mold on the back, so you can't see it, right? They just flip the drywall over. 9 times out of 10, you can't smell it. But that doesn't mean that there's not a problem. Some mold requires aeration, other mold does not. But just because you can't smell something doesn't mean that there's not an issue. Must, mildew, moldy smell, you definitely have an issue. But a lot of the times we call this like the hidden in plain sight issue, right? Because you can't see it and you can't smell it, which makes it far more problematic. So building material is really important. The way with which people put structures up is really important. What that structure was exposed to is really important. And just because you can't smell something, it does not require visible water to grow mold, right? And it does not require visible food. What do I mean by that? Like dust. Dust feeds mold easily.
I felt like everyone before moving into a new place get tested, right? Like get tested, and then if you're still unsure, get yourself tested, and then just to sort it out.
Well, there's an extension we can ask for in our inspection period. And I just went through this 2 years ago. It was a non-negotiable when I moved into my house in Florida, nonetheless. I'm like, oh, I know where I'm going. So we are doing things preemptively and proactively. But you can ask for an extension in the United States, at least. You can ask for an extension in your inspection period from 10 to 15 days. The hard part is finding a really good assessor. Like I lucked out. I got a really amazing assessor. You can run an ERMI by yourself. They're easy to access. You just want to make sure you have someone that can help you interpret the results because it's not always the score that you need to look at. It's the types of mold that are showing up on the ERMI. But it's okay to ask for those things to assess and identify if there's an issue in the home. We didn't find mold mycotoxins. What we did find was volatile organic compounds because the air conditioning unit wasn't sealed in the garage. So they were leaking butane or gas into.
my God.
I'm like, how are these people living in this house? Like, I'm very sensitive to the scent of those things, but not everybody is. They were leaking butane into the house. So yeah, it was part of my inspection, and I just told the sellers, I'm like, hey, I'm going to test the house for mold, because if I'm going to invest, I need to make sure that it's a safe place for me and my family. So I encourage everyone, like you're saying, to find an assessor, and if they can't find an assessor, to find the test that they can run prior to moving in. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this place. Like,
Absolutely.
you're going to call it home long term, hopefully, most of you, right? Like, just a little bit extra will go a really long way in making sure that you're safe.
Absolutely. So if mold is inactive, is it no longer a cause for concern?
No, dry mold is still equally as problematic. A lot of the times it causes more allergenic responses, right? As opposed to, which is an immune response in and of itself. We see variance in responses, but dry mold a lot of the times is a trigger for histaminic response. So we see a lot of that, like, you walk outside and you have a pollen-based reaction. You see a lot of that with dry mold. So dry mold is just as problematic in some instances as a wet mold, if you will.
Wow. Many
Yeah.
people use bleach to clean mold. Is that safe?
No, can we put a PSA out there? Please do not use bleach. Please, please, please. And I'm going to tell you why. Bleach is going to get rid of the color of the mold, but it is not going to actually address the mold in and of itself. Bleach is 70% water, and it's a salt. It's an oxygenating salt. When you know your biochemistry, you freak out a little less about bleach when you understand dilution and what it does, right? I know it's a known toxin, but so are essential oils. So when it comes to bleach, it will 100% get rid of the color of the colony that you're visualizing. But in most instances, it's going to cause the colony to grow, and it's going to anger the colony too. So you're going to get this off-gassing
Oh my
of
God.
mycotoxins that's going to create more of an issue than just leaving it alone and getting proper support. If someone's like, I really want to address it, things like Benefect or EC3 or Branch Basics, those are all really impactful things that you can utilize. But again, if you're not sure where it's coming from, why it's there, why it keeps coming back, please get yourself some support, because this is not stuff you want to play with. It can make you and your family very, very sick. But bleach, no. No.
Okay, this brings me to the next topic, because I think it's really important to work with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yes.
So important.
Yes.
So how can someone work with you?
All they have to do is come find me on Instagram, right? I'm very open to conversation, but we have an application. It's very easy. At Taylor Wellbeing on Instagram, drop your details in an application, and then we'll hop on a complimentary discovery call with you. We want to make sure we're a good fit. So we want to give somebody an opportunity to ask us questions about how we practice and what we offer. And then I want to get to know you a little bit better, because if we're not a good fit, I will certainly refer you to somebody who may be a good fit. But it's very easy. Find my application at the link. Are we allowed to say that still? Link in bio, right? Instagram is like, very, you can say this, you can't say that. So find the link in my bio, drop an application, and then we'll hop on a phone call just to make sure that we're a good fit.
That makes sense. Tell us
Yeah.
about the balanced beginnings.
Okay. So what do most people overlook and undervalue? The foundations. Like we're a society of shiny new objects, right? We're like, oh, this new supplement or this new protocol or this fancy test. And I'm like, yeah, that's all fine and good. But if we are not sleeping in a way that serves us, sleep looks different from person to person. If we are not following our appetite, right? Like if we're eating when we're not hungry, or we're eating the superfood according to the expert on the internet, but it doesn't really agree with us. If we're not getting sunlight, full spectrum light multiple times a day, it's the same stuff we all repetitively talk about. There must be something to these things if the people in this space constantly refer back to them, right? So Balanced Beginnings is about talking about all of those simplistic things that are not so easy to stay routine with. It's a deep dive on the education as to why we need to get sunlight multiple times a day, what it does for our hormonal and glandular systems, why we need to follow our appetite, and how pH of the digestive tract is really the primary issue with most people having digestive dysfunction. Poor hydrochloric acid is really going to screw you up downstream, right? why, what a conscious waking is versus an unconscious waking, why we don't necessarily all need 8 hours of sleep, why that's going to fluctuate, especially if you're female, like follicular phase versus luteal phase, period versus ovulation versus coming into your period. Sleep's going to look different. So Balanced Beginnings is a place where you can plug in, you can learn about all these things, you get support from myself and the team, and you can connect with like-minded individuals. It's really geared towards the person that's like, I don't know if I'm ready for testing. And it's a lower investment, right? I'm taking everything that I've learned from all of the brilliant people that I've worked with, and I'm distilling it into a very low cost investment to make sure that people can access this information in a way where it all makes sense.
I love it. I love it. This is the not just balanced beginning.
Yes.
It's tailored well-being beginning.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to share?
Is there anything else you feel like we didn't touch upon? Like, I'm very open to
No, I
reflection.
think we're good. We covered everything.
Okay.
I think I would love to invite you back to
Yeah.
have more other topics, because this is super interesting, and then talk more about some of the topics that you cover in Balance the Beginnings. I think this
Yeah.
is super
Let's
cool.
do it. I'd love to chat with you about light or appetite. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misnomers about, even like we live in a world where macros are a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, time and place. But most of us don't necessarily need someone to tell us how much to eat and when. We need to learn how to tune in. Well, I think we're in this movement of learning to disconnect from other people by giving them our power and plug back into our own power. And it's not easy for a lot of people, but like once you get over the discomfort of like, the discomfort of like, oh God, I'm going to trust myself, because we live in a world that constantly teaches us to not trust ourselves. It's a really cool place to be and live.
This is amazing. Until next time.
Yes,
Thank you so
until next
much.
time. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.